It is a few minutes to 9 p.m. East African time. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Daily Report right here on TV47, the home of untold stories. If it is Wednesday, you know it's all about the marketplace. And tonight, we debunk the 2024-2025 budget. I am George Maringa, holding the fort for Hibak side. Our sign language interpreter tonight is Rhoda Nyamai. Here are the highlights. Tonight on the Daily Report, Parliament approves 19 cabinet nominees and rejects one. You know who, but do you know why?
And two, Honorable Speaker, rejects the appointment of Ms. Stella Soy Langat. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Join us to find out. Kenya's volleyball team, Malkia Strikers, have arrived back into the country to a chilly welcome after a poor showing at the Olympics. Get this, not even a team bus to take them home. And the police say they have intelligence of a criminal plot to infiltrate Nane Nane protests set for tomorrow. Even so, the police say they are ready for it.
There are security threats to the country with criminal planning to infiltrate tomorrow's demonstration and commit further crimes.
We thank you for choosing TV47 to inform you, even as we have an important conversation on the marketplace tonight with the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly, who is also the Member of Parliament for Kiharu constituency. Take a snippet.
And therefore, if the fallback position that we will have is the revenue-raising measures for 2 years ago, it therefore means we also have to adjust our expenditure to be that of 2 years ago, Honorable Speaker.
There are those who have argued the government is broke. How broke is the government?
The government is rich and broke to the extent that I have enumerated. We have made so many parts of law. That's maybe why there is so much awareness nowadays. Remember, you can still go to Sigura Rose and amend them. So, there are many options for a country to survive. What the president signed on Monday is a budget which we are calling supplementary one.
Ndindi Nyoro speaks on the marketplace with George Maringa this Wednesday at 9 p.m. only on TV47.
Indeed, you can catch that conversation with the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro in just a short while. At TV47 News is where you can find our handle on X, formerly Twitter. I am at George Maringa _. You can also post to at Hibak Said. Use the hashtag Daily Report, hashtag the marketplace. We look forward to interacting with you. Our SMS line is also open to 22047. Start with your name, where you're watching us from, followed by your comment, question, or feedback regarding the program tonight. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has come out to assure Kenyans of the safety of the Kenyan police delegation in Haiti after reports emerged last week of a Kenyan officer shot in a confrontation with Haitian guns. Principal Secretary Korir Singoe further revealed that the ministry has scheduled a Pan-African civil society event dubbed the Africa for Haiti Initiative this month, aimed to address the multifaceted challenges faced by the Caribbean country. Take a look. A Kenyan police officer who is part of the multinational security support mission in Haiti on Tuesday last week suffered a gunshot injury during a gunfight with a section of the gangs. According to Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Singoe, the officer was apparently wounded in the shoulder while trying to drive out the gangs alleged to have been looting from a truck along the National Hospital APN Seaport Road.
And in that context, there was a situation in which they encountered, one of the gangs, and one of them was shot. The PS confirmed that the Kenyan police officer was treated and recovered and was ready to join the rest of the team members in an active duty. He's actually recovered already. And it will just take a few more days before he goes back to duty.
Despite the Haitian government's assistance in carrying out their duty, one of the obstacles faced by the Kenyan security officials in Haiti has been their inability to interact with local populations cohesively.
You know, they have a resident translator as well, and they're working very closely with their counterparts within the Haitian National Police.
Following lack of sufficient knowledge about the activities taking place within the mission, the Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs and Africa for Haiti movement will jointly host the Harmony for Haiti concert and cultural festival on 24th August 2024. The purpose of the event is not only to show Kenyan support for the advancement and prosperity of the people of Haiti, but also show solidarity with them.
And that is why we at Africa for Haiti saw it fit that we establish this initiative so that we can bridge that gap and build a people-to-people relationship through culture, through music, through arts, dance, and many other activities.
To generate solidarity from the bottom in support of this deployment so that Kenyans can connect with this mission.
Mike Kagwango, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Mike. Acting Inspector General Gilbert Masengeli says the police have gathered intelligence showing criminal threats to infiltrate the protests planned for tomorrow. The protests, dubbed Nane Nane, seek to have 1 million people converge in the capital as the push for reforms and accountability in the government continues. Sheila Chelangat reports.
Tomorrow, the 8th of August, Kenyans who have been pressing for reforms and accountability in government are expected to hit the streets to protest. Another round of demonstration, this one seeking to have millions from across the country converge in the capital.
We call upon the young people of this country that it is time that we come forward.
And with tension palpable on the planned demonstrations, President William Ruto has called on Kenyans to reject violence disguised as protests.
Hatutaki maandamano ambayo inaleta maafa, ambayo inaleta kuharibifu wa mali, ambayo watu wanapoteza mali yao. Tunataka amani. Watu wa Embu mnasema tunataka amani ama mnataka fujo iendelee?
Nane Nane tuko haso. Nane Nane tuko katika majukumu yetu ya kila siku, hakuna mambo ya maandamano.
Meanwhile, the police say they have intelligence on threats to the peaceful demonstrations tomorrow.
Our intelligence report indicated that there are security threats to the country, with criminal planning to infiltrate tomorrow's demonstration and commit further crimes. In anticipation, we have ensured adequate deployment of security personnel.
Protected areas like State House and state lodges have been marked as no-go zones.
We also wish to caution members of the public against contravening the Kenya Civil Aviation Act and Protected Areas Act by avoiding trespass of protected areas such as Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and State House lodges.
The young demonstrators have called the march tomorrow a historical one as their quest for change goes on. Meanwhile, all Kenyans have been assured of their security tomorrow. Sheila Chelangat for TV47.
Thank you, Sheila, for that report. Even as the judiciary, in a statement this evening, for 4 paragraphs, where in the last paragraph they state statement by the judiciary leadership team, the JLT urges protesters and security agencies to adhere strictly to the Constitution and the law when engaging in the protests or discharging their mandate of law enforcement, even as they say that the courts will remain open. Away from that, Parliament has approved 19 Cabinet Secretary nominees for appointment by President William Ruto. However, MPs rejected Stella Langat, who had been nominated for the gender docket. And as our reporter Elizabeth Mutuku tells us, the newly approved CS will have been reminded that they will be subjected to sharp scrutiny by Kenyans, and thus they cannot afford to drop the ball. Take a look.
A crucial vote by legislators, one that could prove beneficial or detrimental President William Ruto's legacy. Parliament finally voted for 19 cabinet secretary approval for appointment by President William Ruto. While presenting selection committee's report in Parliament, Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah praised the committee's work, stating that 19 out of 20 cabinet nominees impressed the committee during the vetting and demonstrated their competence.
Fortunate mentions of our honorable ladies without husbands, and this being a gender ministry, Honorable Speaker, it was a feeling of many people across the country that she may not sit well to address gender issues in that ministry. True, Honorable Speaker, that the nominee is unsuitable for the position to which she was nominated, as she was unable to respond in a satisfactory manner to the queries raised during the approval hearing relating to gender, heritage and culture.
However, despite differing opinions on Stella Soy, some MPs called for Parliament to give her a chance to serve, suggesting that her inability to clearly articulate herself during the vetting process might have been a factor that led the vetting committee to drop her name.
For a rejection or a disapproval of this part and its amendment, so that this lady may also be included. Honorable Speaker, in the first Parliament, we rejected Phyllis Kandie, and she performed very well. Malonza. Now it is this lady. What is our issue with the ladies that every vetting, at least some woman must be rejected? Honorable.
Several MPs have praised the president's move to form an inclusive government aimed at uniting Kenyans.
Those are the best nominees this country can have, Mr. Speaker. The best experts this country can have, Mr. Speaker. When they appeared before the committee, Mr. Speaker, the committee was perplexed. They said we didn't know ODM have this kind of expertise, Mr. Speaker. We thought ODM is just hecklers and people who throw stones, people who make noise in this town, Mr. Speaker. But now we have proved to Kenyans and to the public and to this House that the best expertise is found in ODM, Mr. Speaker.
President William Ruto will now pick up from where he left after dismissing his entire cabinet with newly appointed cabinet secretaries. Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The National Assembly Committee on Appointments has failed to approve the cabinet nominee for Gender, Culture and Art, Stella Soy Langat. The committee decided she was not capable of handling the Ministry of Gender. However, she is fit to serve in other capacities.
The hope of Stella Soy Langat to join President William Ruto's government as a cabinet secretary has suffered a setback after the National Assembly Committee on Vetting dropped the X on her. Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah said that after thorough vetting and engaging her, the committee was not convinced that she can hold the position of cabinet secretary, especially for the gender docket. Among the reasons for her disqualification for the docket include the nominee failed to demonstrate adequate knowledge of topical administrative and technical issues touching on the Ministry of Gender, Culture, Arts and Heritage, to which she has been nominated. Another reason why the committee rejected her is that even though the nominee had held positions in government, serving in the public service, is that those positions did not require long-term strategic planning. As a result, she has not become grounded in any specific leadership role. So it was among the first batch of 20 cabinet secretary nominees vetted Thursday last week. Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah noted that some of the responses from Soy during vetting were not gender sensitive as required of the holder of the office, and that she also fumbled on her responses.
Had a nominee like this serving in a high office like that of cabinet secretary, she may not sit well to serve the public in a manner envisaged by our statutes and the expectations of the public.
She was set to replace former Cabinet Secretary for Gender Aisha Jumwa, who was dismissed from her role after President William Ruto dissolved the cabinet. Before her appointed to the position, she was the Senior Deputy County Commissioner 2 in charge of Nyando Sub-County in 2019. She previously worked in the State Department of Housing and Urban Planning. Langat was also the County Secretary at the County Government of Bomet between April 2020 to October 2021. Paul Kirobi, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Paul. Tonight, the 13th Parliament is in limbo after the formation of the broad-based government, which gives President William Ruto and Azimio coalition leader Raila Odinga a supermajority in Parliament, where the opposition and the government side are reading from the same script. Critics argue the new era of supermajority will weaken the opposition in executing its oversight mandate, an issue that came up during today's vote for Ruto's second cabinet. Apollo Kamau reports.
The impact of President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga's supermajority dominance in parliament became clear during Wednesday's vote for Ruto's cabinet nominees after a section of Azimio MPs who wanted to contest the nominees list were stopped by their counterparts, led by new minority leader Junet Mohammed.
As members of that opinion say aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
During the debate on the approval of the cabinet nominees, a section of MPs vowed not to let the supermajority role interfere with their oversight mandate in plenary and House committees, despite vocal critics of Kenya Kwanza, Opiyo Wandayi and John Mbadi, now part of the Kenya Kwanza administration.
What I see is political manipulation of joining numbers of UDA and the ODM to get a supermajority, but not a genuine concern to give Kenyans competence.
Honorable Speaker, it's not going to make sense to have watchdog committees of this House being chaired by people who claim to be in the minority when we know they are in the majority, Honorable Speaker.
We will do our work as opposition. And I've heard also some people here saying, oh, we are now one in government, there is no opposition. I want to tell you that some of us who are elected in the opposition will do our work.
The supermajority dilemma is also seen as a threat to Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who is facing an impeachment threat. This is after Minority Leader Junet Mohammed and Murang'a Woman Representative Betty Maina said Gachagua has abdicated his mandate as a national leader to become a regional kingpin.
We have a deputy president who's serving only one region, Mr. Speaker. And the region I come from are almost thinking of having their own deputy also. Can we have people who are serving the country in totality, Mr. Speaker?
We have been having a problem of passing leaders and then they retreat to regional politics, regional development, or village cocoons. We are here to pass regional, national leaders.
President William Ruto looks to get the leeway to push his agenda, including changing the constitution and passing government-sponsored bills due to the supermajority strength. ODM and UDA have the highest number of MPs in the 13th parliament, with the two sides now combining forces. The number is expected to rise upwards to more than 250 MPs allied to the two leaders. Apollo Kamau, TV47.
Thank you, Apollo. You caught me going through some of your feedback, your questions that you have. Jeremiah Nyonga on X, you say, as the chair of Budget and Appropriation Committee, I would like to know the plan in place to ensure funds are appropriated to absorb interns under public service internship program who are rendered jobless after expiry of the internship every year since the program started. Keep your feedback coming at TV47 News. We also have your feedback right here on the SMS platform 22047. Start with your name, where you're watching us from, followed by your question, comment regarding the program. I am at George Maringa _. You can also post to @Hibak Said. Use the hashtag Daily Report, hashtag the Marketplace. Talking of the Marketplace, we want to pay a few bills, but when you come back, that conversation with Ndindi Nyoro will be coming your way in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. I'm still going through some of your feedback on our SMS platform. You don't say your name. Please start with your name when you're texting us. Thank you very much. You say, I'm interested in knowing whether the junior secondary schools JSS will be confirmed. Additionally, why is the Teachers Service Commission TSC claiming that 18 billion Kenya shillings is insufficient to confirm 46,000 interns? Is the confirmation of JSS genuine, or is it being used politically to appease the teachers? Those questions shall be answered. Let's continue with the news. Our conversation coming your way in a short while. 5 people from the same family have died, with 1 person still missing in a landslide witnessed in Baringo County. And as Elizabeth Atieno now reports, 5 people have so far been rescued.
The deafening silence only disturbed by a stranded hen in this home located in Kapchebukel village, Baringo County. Clearly, all is not well. 4 members from this homestead, a mother and her 3 children, in the Tuesday night deadly landslides that rocked this area, leaving a total of 5 people dead. 5 people have been rescued so far.
Nimepoteza mama, nimepoteza kijana mdogo, nimepoteza kijana katikati ya form 1. Hii imetusa sisi kabisa. Tulikuja usiku jana, tukakuja kuangalia na tukarudi asubuhi. So tulikuja kushughulikia kutafuta mwili mpaka tukapata, tulianza kupata ya mama na mwisho tukapata ya mtoto mmoja tena.
Only the father and his son live to tell the tale of the unfortunate turn of events.
Nimepoteza kijana mdogo, nimepoteza kijana katikati ya form 1. Hii imetusa sisi kabisa. Tulikuja usiku jana, tukakuja kuangalia na tukarudi asubuhi. So tulikuja kushughulikia kutafuta mwili mpaka tukapata, tulianza kupata ya mama na mwisho tukapata ya mtoto mmoja tena.
Only the father and his son live to tell the tale of the unfortunate turn of events.
So mimi ndio nasikia uchungu sana. Nyumba ya mzee imeenda yote, kuku yangu imeenda yote, store, kila kitu. So mimi sina kitu.
Kuna watu ambao wako traumatized sana kwa sababu ya hii maafa. Kupoteza watu 4 wa jamii moja sio rahisi, ni kitu ngumu sana.
Landslide also hit Kapkombe area, burying a local woman alive. The woman's house has been covered by mud from the landslide, with 2 graves from the homestead swept away.
Yesterday at around past midnight, we had a series of mudslides that happened within the ridge of Tugen Hills, and more specifically along the Kapkombe area, that is Baringo North Sub-County, and Kasisit area in a village called Chebogel.
As we toured the scene, the destruction from the landslide is still evident. Kenya Red Cross and the Baringo County Disaster Department have since embarked on a search and rescue mission for 1 person that is still missing.
Baringo County government, the road infrastructure is affected by this disaster, and we hope the rain will subside so that we can respond properly.
Area residents have been urged to move to safer grounds as the rainy season is expected to continue. Elizabeth Atieno, TV47.
Let's make sense of the notes, where the Central Bank of Kenya has released an updated bank notes of 50 Kenya shillings, 100 Kenya shillings, 200 Kenya shillings, 500 Kenya shillings. Some of the changes made in these new bank notes are the signature of the Central Bank of Kenya governor, where it will be of Dr. Kamau Thuge. The signature of the Principal Secretary of the National Treasury, where it will be of Dr. Chris Kiptoo. The year of publication will indicate the year 2024, and as the bank remains vigilant to curb counterfeit notes, the security thread on the note will have color-changing effects when tilted slightly that are specific to each note. Nonetheless, these new banknotes will be similar to the previous notes and circulate alongside the previous notes. The government, through the Office of the Principal Secretary for Higher Education, Beatrice Muganda, has announced the extension of the application process for university funding and scholarships by 10 days from 5th August to August 15th. The PS further encouraging students who sat for their KCSE last year, that is 2023, to apply swiftly to benefit from the extension, even as she addressed the university funding debate. Anthony Mwangi with that story.
Office of the Principal Secretary of Higher Learning Education, Beatrice Muganda, has sought to demystify the new funding model.
Raised during our engagements is that some students have yet to apply for university funding because they have not received their national identity cards. We understand the urgency of this matter and assure all stakeholders that the government is working diligently to expedite the issuance of new identity cards. We want to inform prospective students that they can still apply for scholarships and loans without having an identity card.
In what the government terms as sharing the burden, the Ministry of Education, through the Office of the Principal Secretary of Higher Learning Education, Beatrice Muganda, has sought to demystify the new funding model. The model, which will see the government offer up to 70% scholarships for Band 1 students considered to be the most needy and only 30% to Band 5 students considered to be somewhat better off, will see some parents pay as little as 6,120 Kenyan shillings a year, and others pay up to 244,800 Kenyan shillings per year.
Advocates for the creation of an education fund to enhance access to equity and quality of education and training at the university and tertiary college levels, with the aim of providing relevant and adequate skills and competencies in strategic disciplines to spur industrial and economic development in line with the aspirations of Kenyans.
Students are being urged to use digital links to apply for the funding through the 3 links, that is www.hef.co.ke or www.helb.co.ke, where they will be led to portals and use their KCSE index numbers to log in and update their profiles.
Are critical. And as you know, the government has embarked on a very ambitious project of building 100,000 kilometers of fiber optic. And already the government is establishing digital hubs in every ward in this country. So that makes access to this digital infrastructure very easy.
This could prove as a relief for some parents compared to the between 40 to 54,000 Kenyan shillings school fees paid in high school. Anthony Mwangi, TV47.
Sports news brought to you
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism, how to farm.
Motivate.
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
And break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m. The Grind, where business meets brilliance. It's not just about the ideas.
I was working as a shampoo boy. I used to wash clients' hair on the sink.
It's about making them happen. From big wins.
In primary school, when we would be asked what people want to be, I was categorical that I want to be a nurse.
To hard lessons.
The consoles change, the gaming equipment keep changing.
We cover it all. Tune in to The Grind, where every episode is packed with insights.
The person who is serving customers, always be a customer-centric.
Strategies.
When you pay attention to detail, you get luxury items.
And stories to fuel your ambition. Don't just dream it, grind it. Mondays at 7:30 p.m.
Jiunge nasi tunapoangazia safari za viongozi bora. Kutoka kwa ushindi mkubwa hadi masomo magumu.
Wakati wetu kwamba wasichana si wa kusoma, ni wa kuolewa, ng'ombe ipatikane, wazazi wakuwe watajiri.
Tunashughulikia yote.
I wish I were a better investor.
My parents taught me how to look for things for myself.
Tazama Mfahamu Kiongozi, ambapo kila kipindi kimejaa maarifa, mikakati na hadithi za kukuza azma yako.
For me to succeed, I have to fight.
Kila Alhamisi saa 1:30.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire.
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
Motivate.
Have a conversation with the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro. He is the Member of Parliament for Kiharu constituency and more importantly, the Chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for joining us.
Thank you very much, George.
And
na karibuni sana.
Asante.
Yeah.
Always a delight having you on the program.
Thank you very much.
And tonight you want to focus on the budget, the docket that you hold, especially in the National Assembly, and the backdrop of all that we have seen happening in the country. I will begin by picking your thoughts, especially from what happened last week, from the courts. The Court of Appeal held that the Finance Act 2023-2024 was unconstitutional. That is what you said in Parliament on the floor of the House, but as Chairman of Budget and Appropriations Committee, what do you make of that?
Thank you very much, George, again for coming over here. This is where we serve Kenyans in regards to the budget making process, and it's a very intense job because every now and then we are usually in a cycle, whether through making of the budget, implementation, because it's a long process. Last week, as you say, the Court of Appeal ruled in regards to the finance bill of 2022-2023. From the onset, because it's important that we also move together with the viewers.
Yes.
In Parliament, we have two committees that primarily, actually three, that deal primarily with budget making process. One is the Finance Committee, led by my brother Honorable Kimani Kuria. The other one is called Debt Committee. Debt Committee also sets anything around debts, led by Honorable Shurie. We are also now on this other side of the expenditure, which is the budget side. The budget and appropriation is basically about expenditure. The other two is about where the money is coming from. Because money either comes from revenue or from deficit. Deficit means then you have to borrow. On the revenue side, money comes either from ordinary revenue, appropriations in aid, which is the monies you pay in any government office when you are receiving a service, or a grant. Grants are usually marginal. The bulk of the money that we raise as a country comes from ordinary revenue, which is basically taxes across all the cadres of taxes. So definitely, therefore, last week's judgment has a ramification on the money we collect, and therefore also should have on the money we spend. Because budget is two-sided. Just like a household budget, where you get money from salary, from sale of a plot, from rental income, and this on the expenditure side, school fees, maintenance of a vehicle, food, clothing is basically how the government runs. If therefore on the household you have predicaments meeting the revenues, either by way of having your flat not being occupied, people have moved out, then what usually you do is to adjust your expenditure, or then you borrow to maintain the same utility you are having before. We're in the same situation now, and I am sure maybe going forward we will have a fairer judgment.
Fairer judgment.
Yeah.
So at this point, Mheshimiwa, the question has been, so do we revert to the budget of the 2023, 2024, or 2022, 2023? What do we work with?
As things are now, there is no finance bill of 24-25.
Yes.
As you know, the president never assented to it. As things are now, though there is an appeal, I think so, there, if I'm anticipating, if there is no appeal then, even the 2023-2024 is therefore not in force. And therefore then, that leaves the last one, which is 2022-2023 finance bill. Remember, again, I'm keeping repeating, finance bill is totally different from budget.
Budget, yes.
Yes. Finance bill deals with revenue, headed by or oversighted by a different committee in Parliament. Yes. But we have to answer it because we work together. So, in that respect then, the fallback is now on 2022, revenue-raising measures. Now, all is not lost, because you know what we call now finance bill is because we are made so many parts of law. That's maybe why there is so much awareness nowadays.
It's an amendment
of so many things. It's like what we call an omnibus. Remember, you can still go to singular laws and amend them. So there are many options for a country to survive.
Okay. And so yesterday we saw the president, and you were there at State House on Monday rather, the president assented to the supplementary budget. If you could just break down to our viewers what exactly that process entailed in terms of, we saw the austerity measures are being implemented, some, I think, 174 billion, especially towards government. What exactly did you see, and what did the president assent to at State House on Monday?
What we were doing is actually, yes, on Monday, is that the procedure, when we pass a bill in Parliament, for it to become an act, then it has to be assented by the president. The authority to spend money, public money, comes as some form of a law. And that is why appropriation bill becomes an act. Basically now giving various ministries, departments, and agencies of government the authority then to be able to spend public money. What the president signed on Monday is a budget which we are calling supplementary one. But in practical sense, that is actually the main budget. It is supplementary one because there are no other semantics to call it, because it's a revision of a budget. But in terms of practice, we have not had a budget that is being implemented since the lapse of the last financial year. And as you know, it was put in abeyance because the revenue side was affected through what we were discussing before.
Yes.
The revenue-raising measures. So at that point then, it necessitated that the cloth is this size. What kind of suit are you going to make out of it? Then, therefore, we had to go back and see, since we had made the budget in anticipation of the full revenue-raising measures, and they are not attainable, then what do? We go back and do exactly what we need to do. There are only two options in that situation. One, you borrow slightly more. We have been able to do that. We have borrowed an extra 176 billion shillings. Our deficit to GDP ratio has risen from 3.38% to 4.3%. Is it a bad or a good thing? It is not a very good thing. But which options did we have? None on the table by that time. On this other side, to fill the gap, we had also to scale down our expenditure. Because then doing those two things bridges the gap of the revenue that was to be raised. So therefore, the total budget was cut by 145 billion shillings for national government and another 20 billion shillings for county governments. Parliament also lost 3.7 billion. Judiciary lost also roughly 2 billion shillings. Therefore, that is the kind of a budget that was signed by the president yesterday. So the budget is 3.88 trillion shillings. That budget has several components. One is the recurrent expenditure for national government, which is just almost 1.6 trillion shillings, 1.59 to thereabout trillion Kenya shillings. Development expenditure is around 641 billion Kenya shillings, which we have scaled down from a high of over 750. County governments are now receiving, the real money is 380, but in the budget you see we have factored more than that because they are carryovers. There is money that was not released in the last financial year, which we had to budget afresh. The other thing then is what we call CFS, Consolidated Fund Service, is around 1.3 trillion shillings. That is where the problem of the country is actually. Because, George, in a budget of 3.88 trillion, 1.008 trillion is money that is going into the repayment of interest rates to service our financial obligations. Interest rates alone for our loans. These are loans taken over the years. Do we have to pay? Exactly. Failure to pay a loan or financial obligations as a country becomes as catastrophic as when you default in a bank as an individual or a household. Credibility, once it's lost, your ability to raise more money becomes more expensive because people view you as a risky borrower. And therefore your cost goes higher. Financial institutions start to get a fever. Because remember also, when the government is borrowing, it borrows from who domestically? It is the banks, it is insurance companies, it is the Kenyan people. We are spending 750 billion shillings into payments of interest rates domestically. Therefore, the monies we are spending to pay external debts is around 250 billion. I want you to see that paradox. But when you go into our public loan book, it is 50-50, 50% domestic, 50% foreign. It therefore shows you one thing. Our expenditure in servicing the financial obligations that are domestic are 3 times higher than that of foreign. It's because the domestic money is more expensive. Currently, there is an infrastructure board where Kenyans are actually lending money to government at 17%. So what am I trying to explain? It is whether we must pay. Yes, we must pay. It's Kenyans who have lent government money. It is banks. And once you start signaling like you can't pay or you are not willing, then what that does is also to transfer the same fever to institutions that have lent government money. And it becomes now a cycle that is vicious in nature. On the revenue side, we'll be raising through this budget 2.6 trillion Kenya shillings in ordinary revenue. That is a climb down of 285 billion shillings from what we thought we would. Most of it, of course, that is ordinary revenue. Appropriations in aid is increasing marginally by 2 billion shillings. It's a lot of money. But in the essence of things, not too consequential in terms of budgeting for a country. Appropriations in aid is around 440 billion shillings. approximately. Grants around 51 billion Kenya shillings. The reason why I am tabulating all those is for you to see the country heavily relies then
on debt,
on revenue-raising measures, which are taxes, which are ordinary revenue, but also the number 2 one is actually debt, as you've correctly said it.
Yes.
Because in terms of debt, then if you see the whole there is over 767 billion shillings, which is a climb up from what we anticipated, but those are the options on the table now.
Is the government feeling quite desperate as we look at it in terms of trying to then manage the mathematics of the country? Is it a desperate situation? Is that what we are getting from the fiscal conversation and atmosphere in the country?
Whether things are tough or not, the answer is clear to all Kenyans that yes, everyone has to tighten their belts. Because, as I said before, we have a 1 trillion expenditure which we cannot debate about. Look at it this way, George. Out of that budget, 1.00 something, 08 trillion interest rate. Over 250 billion pensions for Kenyans who are retired. You can't debate about that. Second thing, 650 billion to education sector. Debating about that is debating about whether to fund help, whether to fund capitation, whether to fund JSS confirmation, and all those things. Almost non-debatable. Over 150 billion into healthcare. It's basically going into subsidizing what Kenyans should pay as they receive quality service in our health facilities. The other money is then that is left, around 60 billion, development into roads, which is marginal. It's too little when it comes to roads, because the pending bills alone in roads is now going to 200 billion. So it's a drop in the ocean. So we have some heavy lifting to do as an economy, and that is the reality. We have known it is the reality, and maybe that's why there were those measures to try and raise some little more money. However, even in that situation, you look at an economy in a multifaceted manner. Remember, you manage an economy using 2 principles or policies. One is fiscal policy. The other one is monetary policy. Government spending and taxation are fiscal tools. Why are they useful? They are useful, number one, for stability of the economy. Even before you talk about growth, stability for an economy is more important. Stability is what? Stability encompasses many things. It encompasses prices of commodities, which you see data released every month about inflation. It's a very critical component. The second thing is currency strength. Currency trade strength is a component of the balance of payment. You use monetary policy, and also fiscal policy is equally important. The other one is GDP itself. GDP, is it growing or is it not growing? And at what percent? Now, what fiscal policy does is to try to manage all those things at the same time. It's walking a tightrope, because there are things you do which are good for managing inflation, but they end up squeezing the growth of the economy. For example, when you look at the global economy now, Kenya being part of the global economy, for the last 3 years, the economies of the world have been, for the last 2.5 years, they've been dealing with the biggest challenge, which has been inflation. I told you before, stability is more important for an economy than even growth. Now, as the economies now take a chance between stability in the commodity markets, what tool do you invoke? You invoke a contractionally monetary tool and a contractionally fiscal tools. Contractionally fiscal tools is you try not to have so much money in circulation. Because inflation, being three principal things, food inflation, fuel inflation, co-inflation. Co-inflation is basically a component of how the country is trading on the issue, on things that are not food items and fuel items. But what am I trying to explain here, George? What I'm trying to explain is that the tool that is used to manage this inflation, especially co-inflation, is fiscal. Try to have little money in circulation. It's both monetary and fiscal. How do you do it in terms of fiscal? You constrain government spending and you raise taxes. Those things have the same effect, economically speaking. When we start monetary easing, when we start having expansionary policies, both monetary and fiscal, then the money starts flowing in the economies. There'll be some warmth, investment, more employment, but sequentially more demand. And that is now what will jumpstart the economy. But the issue is timing.
Timing.
When you go opposite side of what the world is doing, you are likely to get unintended consequences.
So in this then budget that you've said it's pretty much like the budget we'll be working with that was signed on Monday, what then are the allocations in terms of the gainers in the departments that have been allocated and those which would equally be sort of the losers in this case?
That's a good question. Let me start with some of the areas we deemed to be too critical for the economy. Because as you balance the other things I was saying, remember you are not managing an abstract economy. You are managing an economy with the people. And therefore, even when you are managing the macros, people and GDP is one thing, people's welfare is also central to any policy maker. And in that respect then, even when we needed to cut more, there are things we thought are too important for the economy that they had to be facilitated and funded. One, as I said before, education sector continued to be one of our major sectors. George, TSC alone is the biggest government agency because we allocate to TSC 350 billion shillings. HELB is getting over 36 billion shillings. The new university funding model is getting 17.8 billion shillings. Capitation is getting money both in JSS, should be around 10 to 15 billion. Primary schools are getting capitation. Senior secondary schools are getting capitation. Every child in Kenya in a senior secondary school, every student, including the ones in national schools, can you imagine the government pays for them 17 to 22,000 shillings every year, depending on the disbursement? Imagine. You know, some of these things, you know, when you talk about government and expenditure, it seems like a block of something. But these monies go back to Kenyans. Now, that's education sector.
Okay.
The other thing is that Kenya relies on primary production a lot when it comes to the growth of the economy. And agriculture is agriculture itself, fisheries, forestry. In Kenya, as you know, forestry is not a revenue earner anymore because of the courts again. And therefore, we are left with one major primary productive sector, which is now the mainstream agriculture. On that respect, what you've done, and knowing for sure that most of the Kenyans, over 70% of the rural population is engaged in agriculture, we have put 7.5 billion shillings into fertilizer subsidy. We have put in 1.5 billion shillings into stabilization of milk prices. We have given UKCC. What is their work? Their work is to be a defender a defender of raw milk prices, so that we make sure the net price of milk, raw milk, is at least 50 shillings that goes to the farmer. The other thing, we have put in 3 billion shillings that will go into coffee cherry revolving fund. This money is for farmers and societies to access credit at highly subsidized rate of, I think, 3%. We have also allocated 2 billion shillings that will be going into payments of coffee debts. As you know, George, if you go to Kirinyaga, you go to Murang'a, you go to Nyeri, you go to other areas that are coffee growers, most of these societies are riddled with debts. The ones we did in phase 1, in terms of tabulation, is 10.7 billion for confirmation of the teachers who are currently interning in JSS. And our anticipation is for them to be confirmed in totality. Also, the people in coast, majority of them live in squatters centers. They live in what you usually hear called the absentee landlords. Land belonging to people, but then people already are living there. So that Kenyans cannot continue to live in that kind of squalid conditions. We also allocated money to start buying this land so that Kenyans can be settled in a place they can call home. Many other sectors also, but I've just given the highlights. The losses are everyone. The executive is losing. For the first time, for the first time, the county governments are also losing 20 billion shillings in the equitable share. Parliament is losing 3.7 billion. Judiciary is losing around 2 billion shillings. Everyone is taking a haircut. Indeed, we are taking a short break right here on the Daily Report. When we come back, we still continue with this conversation with Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, Member of Parliament, Kiharu Constituency, and Chairman, Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided to cross the bridge by his house and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup of the blueberries.
So, grab your imagination hats and get ready to explore with us. Join us every Saturday at 9 a.m. for new friends, amazing stories, and tons of laughter.
Join us as we explore the journeys of those who defy the odds and break barriers. We dive deep into the stories of triumph.
Sometimes when parenting a child with a special need or whatever disability, family life becomes a bit complicated and you may end up raising the child on your own.
Here, we inspire,
I have a farm which one we showcase with other dyslexic youths and autism how to farm.
motivate,
It's never easy, but what we do, the best thing is to work with another parent who has an elder child than yours.
and break through the barriers one story at a time. Push your boundaries beyond the limit. Saturdays at 8 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching The Marketplace right here on the Daily Report. Thank you for staying with us. We're still with Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, Member of Parliament, Kiharu Constituency, and Chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly.
Everyone is looking at Commissioner, and in terms of some of the issues that were raised by the young people that we saw, during the demonstrations and protests, is that these allocations, why don't we work with what we have? You do not need to, and the argument in some quarters was, it is okay that this government came in, but it is enough to first of all implement some of the issues in the previous financial years instead of topping up more and allocating more. There was a conversation on the allocation of the office of the First Lady, the Second Lady, and that of course we saw was rejected in Parliament. What are some of the issues that perhaps did you seek to address the concerns that were rising from the previous financial year, especially from Kenyans?
That's why we have been able to cut back the budget. We would not have done it ordinarily. The other thing that we have done, listening to the people of Kenya told us, you people, the government is too big. The government is no longer now serving Kenyans, it is serving the machinery of government. And to a large extent, I agree. I agree. From where I sit, the government is too big. From where the president is, the government is too big. You can imagine this. 600 billion is going into salaries for civil servants alone. Parastatals are more than that then. You get me? So what we did as the first phase is almost to ban all manner of per diems, because there's no money for people to go outside Nairobi to work in hotels
and to meet.
Even as in Parliament now, we are using the facilities of Parliament so that at least we free up any resource that would go into real service to Kenyans and development. The other thing which we have started doing, Kenya has over 334 sagas, some organizations of government. That, many, some of which duplicate roles. In this budget, we have not funded 47 of them. We have only funded salaries. Because the government thinks it's even cheaper to pay some staff money and stay at home than when they are coming to the office. And since now, when you're in government, George, you have to do a lot of balancing. As much as you want to cut expenditure, as I told you before, the economy is not abstract. You are dealing with people. So you can't wake up one morning and say, we have sacked 50,000 Kenyans from public service, for example. So even the parastatals that we are winding up, the ones that we are merging, we are not doing it abrupt because you are dealing with people. You need to have empathy as a government. And therefore what we've done is, first of all, not allocate money for what we call O&M, operations and maintenance. It has saved us 7.9 billion shillings. Going forward is a conversation we have to have as Kenyans. We ask ourselves, do we need the kind of size of government that we have? And I don't think we need. The government can operate optimally. That's my belief. If you remove core services like teachers and health services, these other offices of me and the other person, we can operate optimally at 60% of the facilitation we already have.
And then we wouldn't have the strains that you feel.
We would free up a lot of money to go now into real service. The other thing that we have to think about, George, as we talk about responding to the things that Kenyans told us to do. You know, many times we confuse when we see government is spending too much money on recurrent. Recurrent is not recurrent in terms of servicing a vehicle or thereabout. Remember, the entire budget for education is recurrent in nature. Capitation is recurrent. Cash transfer is recurrent. Payment of debt is recurrent. That is why in the budget it appears recurrent is gobbling up too much resources, but some are social investments. When you invest money in capitation, to me it's not a recurrent. It's a social investment because you are polishing this human capital to be better productive in the coming years, which will be useful for the country as it is useful for the individuals and households. So we have tried our best. Funding education is also funding what Kenyans told us, and we have responded to that, but it's a process that will take time. Because some of these things, as I said, from where I sit,
this is a conversation with Kenyans, but really, sometimes we've seen executive orders, and I do not, some have argued, in the same way you can slash and increase something, you can equally proceed to implement, say in phases, and see what can be done. What are some of the things then that do not require to have these grandiose constitutional changes? Because that's what Kenyans interpret when the government says a conversation with Kenyans.
To be very honest, as through my little experience in the budget committee, Kenyans are overgoverned. Kenyans are hugely overgoverned. You have a litany of commissions which, if you just go to a normal Kenyan in the street, ask them, ask my mother, my auntie, ask anyone, walking in Nairobi, walking in Murang'a, driving in Kwale, ask them, Kenya has all these commissions, Kenya has all these parastatus, agencies of government. Which one have you ever been to get service? You realize some of these things are not to serve people, they are to serve the same institution of government. So we have to start doing some adjustments around there. And my proposal is, instead of drastically then rendering people jobless, the government can freeze the way we have done employment. We do reallocation. You could be somebody maybe working in a certain government agency which has been identified to be moribund. Those people are well trained. They could be shifted to where their services are could be optimally harnessed. So that then we optimize on the human capital without necessarily causing disruption by letting other people go. When others retire, instead of employing, we first of all capitalize on the ones that are generally in government. And I'm saying so because, George, the radical thing to do would be lay off people and that's it. But remember then,
issues addressed in this new budget in terms of ensuring that, well, whereas we are collapsing and working with, reductions from the rear demeanor of those in the executive, the lavish lifestyle, the renovation of government offices, institutions, state.
I want to assure them we have done exactly that. We have cut all excess weight, all excess expenditure that is ostentatious in nature. People have only been left to work, not to travel, not to do a lot of other things.
So, do you think then that Kenyans will understand these measures that you've taken? Because in the past they have argued government is speaking macro, it is speaking of, as you say, abstract issues. They seem not to be coherent with what the government is doing. Do you think then that this seeks to quiet the noises and then, quote unquote, allow the government to work so that then after a few months or, you know, a period of time, we'll be able to see the trickle-down effects of this slashing down of this implementation in the budget?
I would actually hate not to hear any people pushing us further as government. I would hate to hear silence. Kenyans should continually and perpetually be pushing us to do better. Because it's out of that that the country becomes better. We are still a low middle income economy. If we tell Kenyans not to push leadership, what are we telling us? That we are complacent, that we are satisfied where we are, that we are okay with our roads the way they are, we are okay with our education system and the funding the way it is. When we reach that place, I don't think we'll be existing as a nation. The US is a superpower. Places like Japan are developed economies. Places like the UK now, they are having protests. Because the agitation for better is human. The push to get better service, the agitation to get better infrastructure must never cease. So that whatever little money we have to optimally utilize it in a manner that generates general welfare for the majority. However, to answer your question, the leadership, many times we put it like it's leaders on this side of the river and the people who are being led on the other side. No, it has to be people on the same team. People in the same team listen to each other, they explain to each other, and Kenyans have been kind to us. I mean, we have now seen tranquility, and that tranquility helps everyone. It helps the business person, it helps our economy, it helps the sentiments around our economy, and also fundamentally gives people an opportunity to work harder in whatever they are doing.
The government also runs on projects, as you know, it were, and these are the projects that then will be funded by.
Because it's wanted, do. There is one thing I want you to do, one day a feature in Kenya. I have been conversing with the president, and I voice my concern. Go around the country, for example, do the math of all the monies the country has ever spent in irrigation projects in Kenya since 1963. Then tabulate how many are working, except schemes. Except schemes like Imwea, except schemes like the others. Do one feature on TV47. How many irrigation projects, after sinking billions, are working? That is part of the debt you are paying. Some of these things you realize, sustainability was not thought well. We do a project, we leave it to users, do what you want to do with it. But users are our parents, for example. Then you have pushed a 1 billion project to them. Now, tumemaliza kama serikali, chukueni. Some of those things we need to internalize and do better. We need to be very, very firm going forward as a country. We even need to put laws in place that no one must never, ever commit government money without knowing where this money is coming from.
Then, as Chief of Budget, then Kenyans have been, there has been a conversation on corruption. Do you think, and what is your standing point on the issue of budgeting for corruption? Because it has been a conversation. We're saying, fine, we'll dedicate. We've spoken about the figures, the 3.88 trillion now that we're working with right now. In the 1.6 trillion, you find that whereas some will go to development, which is still on the imbalance because you're still paying salaries and everything else, that still is not done either to the standards that is required, so that then we are still budgeting for corruption.
No, I would not say that at all. I think maybe there is a point there but the frame of calling it so is not correct.
Okay.
From where I sit in the budget process, there is actually no money to budget for people to take out to take off with the money. You know, it's direct and so simple. If I put from the 0 shilling to the 3.88 trillion, what are we talking about, George? You're talking about 1 trillion going into paying interest rates. How can you steal that money? It is, unasikia ile tunasemanga imekatwa kwa transformer kama stima. So the money does not reach anyone's hands.
It goes direct.
There is no interaction between anyone asking, oh, do we pay you or not? This is a loan. Pay. The other money, 250 billion pension. I have never heard how can you steal pension? This is money owed to a teacher who retired in 2000. This is money owed to a police officer who retired in 2005. Straightforward, budget 250 billion is going to individuals. 28 billion shillings into cash transfer. How do you take off with that money? The beneficiaries are these are their numbers, their bank accounts. 650 billion to education. You know, I'm saying this because sometimes we miss the point by, we like sensationalizing. Once you put, we sensationalize.
Yes.
Very important issues, important points get lost in between. 650 billion goes to education. What is it? Help. It reaches beneficiaries. I've never had a scandal in help in my entire life because this money is going direct. Capitation, going to pupils direct, students direct. You talk about monies for salaries, to increase police salaries. It's going direct to people. Money for roads, it is going to finish ongoing projects. There is actually no tender, no nothing. So some of those things I think we over-exaggerate in wanting to run away from the actual things. The actual things is that we have a lot of heavy lifting to do in our economy. That's the actual thing. And the actual thing is that we need to grow productivity. Growing productivity may call all of us to tighten some belts at some point. May also necessitate all of us to lessen our appetites for economic development. We first focus on economic growth. Because it's after you balance up things that you can be able to offer roads and electricity. But it goes the full cycle. Kenya is a democracy. You are elected by people. People, when they elect you, I have never ever had any time we are campaigning anyone raising hands and saying, na nyinyi watu tukiwachagua tunataka GDP ya 7%. I have never had at one point. I have also never had in any political baraza anyone telling us, like now as we talk, George, inflation in Kenya is 4.6%. I think 4.3%. Can you imagine? We have contained inflation so well that we are now at the lower band of our own benchmark as a country. But I've never went to any political baraza. Somebody raises hands and they say, nyinyi watu tunawachagua, inflation ikuje chini. Have you ever heard? I've never heard.
Never heard.
What you hear is, tunawachagua mujenge hii barabara. Tunachagua mtupe stima. Tunachagua tujenge hii stadium. Money is needed. Real money for expenditure.
If earlier on Mheshimiwa said that, there is no opportunity to steal because, quote unquote, there is no money.
From the budget side. The government is bigger than the budget. I'm just saying on the budget.
On the budget side.
Yes.
So, and there are those who have argued the government is broke. How broke is the government?
The government is rich and broke to the extent that I have enumerated.
Okay.
We have a budget of 3.88 trillion. 1 trillion is evaporating in paying interest rates. 650 billion is going into education. 250 billion is going into pensions. Security sector, which is basically salaries for chiefs, for police officers. all that sphere of security, maybe take another 400 billion. What is left is only 641 billion for development. And this money, the 641 is not just GOK funded. It includes loans that are being funded for development. So the money specifically coming from government is less than 250 billion, is less than 300 billion for development. And what is it? Majorly the ongoing projects. So it is important for us to say what it is. And what it is that we, out of the decisions made in the past, collectively as Kenyans, we have a heavy burden to carry. But the silver lining is not for long. Once we start seeing global economies using interest rates, then what that means is our service for debt also come low. Once we see qualitative easing, people will borrow more cheap money in our banks, investments will spur, more revenue will be collected by government. It is a triple rent affair where everyone benefits. The household, the government, the farm.
Briefly, if you could touch on, as we enter the home stretch, on the 15th of May, when the president was speaking to students from Harvard, he said he would look at a point where by the time he's done it the first time, the taxes are between 20 to 22%. How achievable is that right now?
If you allow me, I'll also tell you why it will be so good to achieve it.
Okay.
The current tax revenue to GDP ratio in Kenya is 14%. When Kibaki left, we were at above 20%. You know, sometimes you say these figures, it seems like they don't. So what is the percentage that has to do with me as a Kenyan, for example? This is how it is important. South Africa debt to GDP ratio is over 25%. The organization of OECD countries, their ordinary revenue to GDP ratio is 35%. Denmark, Sweden, we are talking about 45 to 46% respectively. What does that mean, George? Our economy currently is 18 trillion Kenya shillings. Just take the calculator, if you can. If our economy, our revenue raising measures are exactly what South Africa is doing, just do 25% of 18 trillion. That is 4.5
billion.
4.5 trillion.
Trillion.
Imagine. You know, it seems, when I'm saying it percentage-wise, it doesn't seem like it is affecting anyone. If we are collecting revenue the same way South Africa is doing, and it's a composition of many things. I'm not saying about raising taxes. I'm talking about expanding the tax base. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having more Kenyans being able to pay taxes by government facilitating what they do to be more profitable. That's what I'm talking about. But if we collected revenue the same way South Africa is doing, the current budget, we would have read a budget, not this one of cutting, the other one of before cuts. We would have read that budget and have some money remaining, 400 billion, to give Kenyans dividends. We tell them your country is doing well, give us your M-Pesa numbers, iko pesa inabaki hapa, turushe. Imagine, if we collected money the same way Kibaki did, if we sustained that, you know, after Kibaki left in 2012, and I'm not trying to accuse anyone, these are figures. Our revenue to GDP ratio came from 20%, it became the lowest in 2022. Up to now, we are struggling to have it climb up. If you do 20% of 18 trillion, that is 3.6 trillion shillings. We'll be correcting 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings. If you add A in A, we'll be reading a balanced budget. So these things are not far-fetched. These things can be real. We can easily read a balanced budget in Kenya soon if we allow ourselves, first of all, to take our fair share of tightening the belt now so that everything else gets stabilized.
Okay. Mheshimiwa, because we have run out of time, you can speak to Kenyans and perhaps address the issues of, you've spoken about a lot today, but in terms of looking at the future. Earlier on when you spoke last year, you said among the issues that the government needs to work on better is the macro is being handled, the GDP, we've seen, the figures are going down. When you look at now money in the pockets, because that's what Kenyans are, arguing about, they do not feel the economy in their pockets, the money in their pockets. If you could speak to, say, this 1 year of this budget and perhaps the remainder of the term, what should we look at and what should we expect?
George, there are two ways of having money in the pocket.
Yeah.
One is having money flowing in the pocket. There are two ways. One is having money flowing in the pocket. The other one is making sure money is not flowing out of the pocket. Those are two ways of sustaining disposable income in households, which are the Kenyans. Now, let me ask you a question. An honest one, because I know it's your work to ask questions, me to answer, but let's converse. Between today, being in August of 2024, and August of 2022, or 2023, if you went to a supermarket with 2,000 bob, when are you likely to carry more goods, today or last year?
Depends on what you're shopping.
Now, let me rephrase. If you went to a supermarket today in Kenya with 2,000 shillings in your pocket, you buy unga, sugar, cooking oil, things we consume on day-to-day basis, and you fuel your car, 2,000 bob, today and last year, when is your bucket having more commodities? Let's be honest.
We leave Kenyans to also answer.
Now, the truth of the matter is that it's usually a difficult job defending government because, as I said, people demand more, and that is what I like myself. Because you have taken some while to answer my question, because the answer is in the affirmative. That if you went to a supermarket today with 2,000, the same 2,000 you went to a supermarket last year, you are going home with more commodities today. You are going home with more kilograms of unga, with the same money, with more sugar, with more rice, with more cooking oil. That's the truth. How has that happened? And I'm going back to the same issue I was talking about, economic growth, economic development. Kenya as a country, our staple food is ugali. Anything associated with maize, whether ugali or githeri or mudhokoi or anything else that has a grain of maize. We came up with fertilizer subsidy, costing us 7.5 to 10 billion. What did that do? And UGA climbed down from 230 to the current 120 or thereabout. So per kg, that's a 50 shillings decrease. If the 2 kg have decreased by 100, then 1 kg conservatively is 50 shillings. The per capita consumption of maize in Kenya per person is around 75 kilograms every year. If you do the math, with just a proportion of that, Kenyans have saved collectively 120 billion out of UGA prices alone coming down. So that's why I told you to measure about pesa mfukoni, you measure whether there has been outflow and also inflow. Outflow is that there is 120 billion in pockets that would have otherwise gone to buy uga, which otherwise were saved to buy uga out of the fiscal policy of fertilizer. The other thing is how money has come into the pocket. I was looking at the employment figures from the private sector. I saw the private sector in Kenya through Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. You can Google. It added 800,000 jobs last year. That is Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Are we at a place where we can say we have achieved? No. There are still so many Kenyans who need jobs. There are still so many Kenyans who have jobs. They need quality jobs. Are we doing something about it? Precisely, yes. Anything around construction of houses is putting money in the pockets of the direct workers and the indirect industries of cement, steel, and the rest. Anything around digital and the fiber we are putting everywhere is about money flowing in the pockets. Is it working? Yes. We have 150,000 Kenyans who are now earning out of digital jobs. Labor exports, how is it helping us? In many ways. One, helping the individuals, helping the households, but also helping our balance of payment. If you look at our remittances, you look at the figures, our remittances are growing every single quarter. Every quarter, growing by, I think it was 28%. And from which countries? You know, sometimes we are told Kenyans only work in Saudi Arabia, in the houses of people. No. Our number one earner of remittances is actually US. US and the UK combined constitute over 56% of our remittances. These are Kenyans working in corporations. Kenya has very top-notch human capital. Go now to a country, any African country, in any capital, from Kigali. People driving those corporates are Kenyans. Go to Botswana. Go to many countries in the world. You'll get Kenyans working there. So labor export, what is the input there? Education. Okay. You know, some of these things, we don't break them down, but they have, it's a moving vehicle. This investment in education has a component around balance of payment through labor export. So it's a whole chain.
Okay.
And it's working.
It's working. So how is the future looking like?
The future to me is looking very good.
Okay.
We may have some bumps around where we are now. Because remember now we have had to increase our deficit.
Yes.
We are adding to the obligations in the future. 2026 is also a year we will be spending quite a lot of money in debt repayment. And therefore between now and 2026, we need to broaden our base, grow our revenues without necessarily taxing Kenyans more. You know, this is it, George.
Yes.
Kenya, the 18 trillion economy, has 20 million working population. A working population of 18 to 20 million Kenyans. Imagine. Now, out of that, 1 million is employed by government, having pay slips in government offices. 2 million have pay slips from private sector. So the people with pay slips are 3 million. As a taxman, that's where you go first. Where are 17 million Kenyans? Where are they?
Businesses.
I mean, who are these? Where are they? 17 million people who the taxpayer does not know where they are. You get what I'm trying to say?
Okay.
If we become, and I know Kenyans are very patriotic, if we just pay our small fair share, we don't need to overtax now the working who have pay slips. We can broaden our tax base, raise revenue, but after raising revenue, we unshackle ourselves from these dire financial obligations of over borrowing.
Okay.
And while you're still doing that, part of these 17 million Kenyans who are not in the radar of tax, remember, one thing that we need to do is also government-oriented, making sure that these Kenyans are productive to a level where they are above the tax radar. In Kenya, as you know, you're earning 24,000, no one touches your salary. How can we make these people earning 24,000 to earn like 40? So that at least they start now participating in tax payment. There are people doing businesses which are micro in nature. What can the government do to make sure that these businesses are growing, so that at least they are at the radar where the taxman can get something from them? Something is being done, as you know, across many things. I don't want to tire you with them. They are being done so that more Kenyans can become more productive. When Kenyans are more productive, then they can participate. Lastly, let me tell you something funny. That in taxation, we see about, in taxation there are things we call canons, about equity, convenience, and the rest. But there is also something funny, theoretically in economics, that one way to raise revenue is for you to have an unequal society. I don't agree with it, by the way, because it says you'd rather have a few people who have so much and therefore paying so much than having income so well distributed
and they get a little.
that no one is within the tax radar. Let me ask you this question. Supposing now there is 1 trillion shillings paid in salaries every year in Kenya. What if this 1 trillion, 800 billion is paid to people earning below 24,000? And therefore there is no payee. Would you rather have this income concentrated to a few people earning so much, therefore pay is 35% or 30%? Or would you rather this money distributed fairly to people, everyone is earning 24,000 and therefore not paying any tax? So the question either way is correct. It is work of government to raise revenue, but it's also the work of government to make sure people are living comfortably.
The end justifies the means.
So you have to find some balance around there, where everyone is also carrying their fair share, while also as government offering good quality service. Very lastly, the issue I told you about tax. Denmark, Sweden, revenue to GDP ratio 45%, 46%. Kenya is around 14. Many times we have a discussion. People ask, but those people pay taxes willingly because they are getting services. They also have no potholes. There are no garbage in their estates.
Education is free.
Education is free. Healthcare is free. Then, George, is an issue of egg and chicken. Now, between quality service and revenue, what should come first? Between governments getting revenue to make sure there is no pothole, that you are not paying anything in school, and now you willingly paying tax so that government offers you that service, what should come first?
Chicken and egg, as you say.
That's the thing now.
Indeed.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and that's why we wind up this conversation with the Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, Member of Parliament, Kiharu constituency, as well as Chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly. I'm George Maringa. Bye-bye for now.